Hello, everyone, and welcome to another thought-provoking episode of Full Throttle here on Unprecedented TV, where we dive head-on into the challenges facing British drivers and much more besides. I'm Paul Naylor, Communications Director for the Alliance of British Drivers, and today we're talking with Anne Widdecombe of Reform UK.
Indeed we are, and I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers. Two things I think we'd like to cover with Anne. One is net zero, which is progressively destroying the whole of UK industry and basically making everybody redundant. And the other thing is the way that road safety is being weaponized and used as another way of basically driving the economy and economic activity into the ground. So it's going to be an interesting episode. I'm sure we'll cover quite a few topics, but it might be a bit ad hoc at times.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not. So, welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Anne.
Hello.
It's been a long time since I've seen Anne. So, I was on tour with Anne just before lockdown. We went to various provincial theatres. I helped Anne to sell a few books. Rather memorably, Anne, I don't know if you remember this one, but Nigel Farage's mother came along to one event, and I managed to upsell an extra book for Nigel. So, so it's lovely to see you.
Arriving. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so go on, Brian. You lead the way on this.
Well, basically, as I said before, net zero is probably the most pernicious piece of legislation that's ever been passed, and the effect it's having on UK industry is absolutely disastrous. And of course, as industry spirals downwards, so do employment prospects, and so we're just in a death spiral, which is being accelerated by the Chancellor trying to tax all economic activity out of existence. And I guess that must be a major concern for Reform UK and for everybody that lives in the country.
Well, the thing about net zero is it's wholly disproportionate. I mean, the UK contributes less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions, whereas places like China and America, account for over 40%. So, I mean, it's quite pointless. Yeah. And what we're being asked to do is to penalise our citizens, to demand that they have more expensive boilers and buy electric cars, in order to really reduce what is a negligible contribution anyway. So it's completely disproportionate. Yeah. And that is why Reform says, well, it will just scrap the target for net zero, and it will save billions of pounds by doing that. Now, absolutely. The other thing about net zero is that we're not self-sufficient in energy. We import energy. Now, I believe that if a nation is to be truly sovereign, it's got to be self-sufficient in three things. The first is the obvious one, which is defence. Well, we're not. We'd have difficulty standing to, quite honestly. The second is basic foods, and we're not, because we're paying farmers not to farm. And of course, the third is energy, and we're not self-sufficient there either. And my belief is that we need, if we're Britain to be a truly sovereign state, we need to aim for self-sufficiency in all those three areas. And that means, I'm afraid, not just depending on wind, which only really works when it's windy, not just depending on wind, not just depending on solar panels, but rather that we use our own energy reserves, of which we have a lot out in the North Sea, and also underground, of course. And then there's always, on top of that, there's always fracking. Now, I don't want to go back to dirty air and complete dependence on fossil fuels. I don't want to do that. But I do want to get a much healthier mix, and I do want us to be self-sufficient, and that means using what we've got, whether it's politically correct or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that's lost in all this, when people start talking about carbon dioxide emissions, Anne, is yes, we might produce 1% of global man-made CO2 emissions, but man-made emissions are only about 3.5% of the total. So there's a huge overwhelming proportion of natural emissions over which we have no control. So we can cut our emissions to the bone by offshoring all our industry, but the effect it will have on the climate is negligible. Even the IPCC admits that even if everybody were to adopt net zero tomorrow, the impact by 2100 would be 0.2 of 1 degree Celsius. And our contribution to that would be 1% of 0.2 of a degree Celsius, so 2/1000ths of a degree. Well, the global satellite measurements go up and down by 0.5 degree in a month. So you wouldn't even know whether your 0.002 of a degree is actually being contributed or not. It's complete madness.
I think the problem is that the whole argument about global warming has now been hijacked, and it is treated as gospel, whereas no science is ever gospel. What Absolutely. Is taught today it very easily be changed tomorrow in the light of new discovery. Okay. But there's a huge amount of money now invested in climate change and research departments and all the rest of it. And it's not in anybody's interest, really, to query it. And of course, if you do query it, you're called a climate denier and all that nonsense. Now, I have no doubt that, the Earth is warming. It's warmed and cooled throughout its existence. Yes. But the idea that we in this country can do anything to stop that warming is just rot. You might as well chuck a sugar cube in Loch Ness and say, oh, look, I've sweetened the waters.
Yeah,
spot on. That's exactly what I argue every time. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and when you try to reason with the politicians that support these policies, they can't counteract logical arguments, so they just adopt sort of an approach of ad hominem insults and bluster, as we've seen from our great and glorious Energy Secretary, Mr. Miliband. Because recently Lee Anderson asked him about contribution to carbon dioxide emissions, and he didn't even know that it was only 1% of global man-made emissions that the UK produces, not total emissions. So,
yeah, I mean, people have just quite blindly signed up to this agenda. Yeah. But I think what is happening now is the public's getting wise, and the public hasn't been wise. Quite honestly, it's gone along with it. It's a jolly good idea to combat global warming, and plant a few more trees and do all these wonderful things. But then, of course, when it starts hitting their own pockets, when they've got to buy the type of car they don't want to buy, when they've got to install the sort of boiler they don't want to install, when they suddenly realize the huge amount of money that is being taken in our taxes to do all of this, then suddenly they're willing to query it.
Everybody supports climate change measures as long as they don't have to pay the bill.
Well, exactly. But I mean, I think they've now got something else as well. They've got a party that actually dares to say, no, this is all rot, and we're going to change this. And that party, of course, is Reform UK. Now, they could be as cross as they like about having to pay for it, but if they didn't have a political party that was on their side, it wouldn't be any use. And if we still just had, the Tories and Labour, if that was all we had, we wouldn't have a serious debate about climate change at all.
Correct.
But now the public have got somewhere to go.
Yeah. I mean that's been a big change, hasn't it?
George Galloway comment about the existing parties being two cheeks of the same bottom is actually very apt. not many people like, but it's pretty accurate.
I think what's happened is
theology, but it's two peas in a pod. I prefer.
Yes, exactly. Yes, probably
but
more.
They are. No. But they are.
I think moving away from a two-party system to effectively a three-party system, or to be honest, a one-party system, because the other two, they're failing massively. There's been so much of a failure over the years between the baton changing between red and blue that really reform is a breath of fresh air for many people.
Well, the way people used to think was, if they had a Labour government that was failing, they used to think, well, it's okay, at the next election, Tories will come along and put it right. And vice versa. When it
exactly.
Depending on where you were, relative to the centre.
And that's what's made the difference, and that's what's giving reform its runaway success, is that they're looking for something different, and it's being offered by one party.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, with 14 years of the Conservatives, as you say, floundering around, I suspect, at least in part, as Catherine Porter says, because they didn't quite realise to what extent the bureaucrats, civil servants and quangos had actually emasculated government. So government comes in, expects to be able to do things, and finds that they're opposed at every turn. And so they thrashed around with that for well over a decade. And then Labour, of course, have come in and seem to be in the thrall of quangos and civil servants and of course international regulations, and determined to just add more sort of pain on top of what we already endured.
It doesn't matter what the civil servants do and what the quangos do. Governments can always oppose that. What matters is what you touched on at the end, which is international interference. And when you're signed up to a whole load of treaties which actually militate against what you want to do, that is a very different situation, because we're a country that has always said we respect law. And if we're signed up to a treaty, we'll fulfill that treaty just because we're signed up to it. But of course, I mean, first of all, the Geneva Convention on Refugees was established in 1951. 1951. It's now 2025. Situations changed completely. The nature of asylum has changed completely. It's no longer about individual persecution. It's about fleeing conflict. And we are therefore entitled, I think, to say, we will come out of that convention. Similarly with ECHR. And we simply have to take control of our own destiny. And we can only do that if we repudiate these conventions and these treaties. Now, it's not something I just want to do lightly like that and throw the whole thing up in the air. But where it has been proven that these treaties are now working to our detriment as a country, then I think we're perfectly entitled to say that's the end of that. And
yes.
If Parliament decides to renounce a treaty, the civil servants, the quangos, and everybody else, and by the way, we could do without most of the quangos.
Yes,
civil
absolutely.
servants, quangos, and pretty well everybody else will have to follow suit, because that will then be the law.
Yeah, and certainly the problem I think with the current administration is that the Prime Minister himself is very much a lawyer before he's a politician, actually, and he believes that international law should override national sovereignty, with which personally I completely disagree.
Well, he's a globalist.
That's evident in his reset with the EU.
Yeah.
Which is yet another surrender of British sovereignty, which we will reverse when we come in. But as I say, you can get rid of quangos. You can make quangos do as the government wants. You can make civil servants certainly do as the government wants. But you can't do that if the law is against you. And that is why, first and foremost, we have to deal with the international treaties.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think I fully understand that as well.
Yeah.
But certainly it is clear that, as you say, that public opinion is now beginning to turn on this subject, because I mean, even I think it was yesterday it was announced that what is driving, despite what the government's been saying about gas prices, what is actually driving energy costs upward is the subsidies for renewables, which are, as you say, reliably unreliable, and B, usually don't deliver power when we really need it, and deliver it when we don't. And they're being paid to switch wind turbines and solar arrays off, because they're supplying power that's surplus to what the grid requires. And then when we hit one of these Dunkelflaute things, the low light conditions and low wind conditions, they don't supply anything at all right when we need power the most.
They're inefficient, they're expensive, they're ugly. There is very, very little to commend most of these initiatives, but it's become an article of faith. It's no longer a practical response. It's become an article of faith. And as I say, you've got a party that is prepared to challenge that article of faith. Yeah,
which is refreshing, as Paul has already said.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we will be interested to see what happens, and because I believe Richard Tice actually was on. There's another one of the Scottish refineries is being closed down, I think, and Richard has been on GB News and various other channels, pointing out that we can't allow this to continue because we'll have no industry left.
Well, indeed, and we wouldn't have any steel industry now. and
No.
if Tice and Farage hadn't intervened. So it is very important. I mean, lots of things are very important. First of all, getting senior high achieving businessmen back into this country. They're all fleeing at the moment, the Labour penal taxes. Getting them back into this country, letting them take initiatives, supporting those initiatives, supporting the employee as well by not taking quite as much money as the state now takes, and just trying to get everything working. Now, Mrs. T did it. It can be done. And if you consider where we were in 1979, it can be done. It won't be done by Tuesday afternoon. It will be heavily opposed by elements who don't like what we're doing. But it can be done. Mrs. T showed that. We shall show it too.
Good.
At the point of time of recording this, we're a week away from the budget.
Yes.
And what do you expect to see in that budget, and that will impact in terms of on families regarding potentially motoring, but also net zero? Do you think there'll be anything that will come up in the budget that will force that onto people more, or do you think there'll be some sort of withdrawal of that?
No, I don't think there'll be withdrawal from net zero in the budget. I think it'll be a high tax budget. Exactly how she levies the tax that she promised that she wasn't going to levy, I don't know. But I believe that that is what she will set out.
Yeah, and I think that's very disappointing.
If you want growth, you have to have tax cuts.
Yes. You need a low tax economy to encourage economic growth.
Yeah. Put more money in people's pockets. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, they fuel employment. They fuel spending, which in turn creates employment. Tax cuts create growth. Now, there isn't an economist in the world who will disagree with that basic statement. And yet, because we've got so fixated on any penny you're going to spend, you must account for another penny that's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because we've got fixated on that, which we didn't used to be. We don't make the one step that would absolutely guarantee growth, which is cutting taxes. Now, Truss got it all wrong in the way that she handled it, completely wrong. She tried to do far too much too soon and altogether. But she had the right idea. And the right idea is that you only get an economy going if you lower taxes. You only become competitive with other economies if you lower taxes. You only attract investment. I mean, heaven help us. We put up our corporation tax to the same level as France, and then stood back and looked ever so surprised when businesses went off to the Irish Republic. The rate was much lower. And well, what did we expect to happen? That was under a Tory government.
Yeah. Well, it was Winston Churchill, was it not, who said you can't tax your way to prosperity. It's like standing in a bucket and trying to pick yourself up by the handle.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
but you did ask me if I anticipated any motoring effects from the budget.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is yes, because the motorist is always a prize cash cow, quite honestly. And I have no doubt whatever that without any improvement in the roads and driving conditions, the motorists will be fleeced again. Because we have to drive. We have to drive. The very few people, if you live in the center of a very big city and you work fairly close to where you live, then okay, you do not have to drive. But pretty well everybody else, whether it's taking the kids to school, whether it's getting yourself to work, pretty well everybody else has to drive. And therefore, you're easy to milk because you can't say, no, I'm not driving there. You can't say it. So you're very, very easy to fleece.
Yes.
Certainly when we were on tour, and we did some miles, didn't we? We're big friends of Howard Cox from Fairfuel UK, who for many years has been quite successful in stopping any increases in fuel duty or certainly limiting. I think even Howard, when we last spoke to him on this show, was somewhat skeptical about what will happen in the budget regarding fuel duty. So we're expecting the motors to be hit at least in that way, whether or not there's new taxes that come along with it as well. But even electric vehicles are now being taxed beyond what they were originally said were going to be taxed. So no motorist is safe from this government.
No.
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah. I think that was inevitably going to happen, though, and as we, well, arguably, I'm not even sure this transition will ever be complete, but as the arguably move towards more electric vehicles and lose the excise duty from the fuel on normal conventional vehicles, you have to transfer the tax burden progressively over to drivers of electric vehicles as well, or the books won't balance. It's economically clear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that is true.
Yeah, and I couldn't see any way that even when they were giving, well, as they are still giving big discounts for buying electric cars to various people. Mainly, I think though they're being taken up by company car drivers and business drivers. Less so, I think, private buyers who are still very wary. But still, it was clear from the very start that the tax-free bonanza for electric vehicles wasn't going to last forever. And anybody who thought, oh, I can make a quick buck here by buying an electric vehicle was always going to be sadly disappointed in the long run.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that's economic, fact of life.
Yeah.
And of course, governments quite often will try to get you to do things by making it very attractive at the beginning. I think we can all remember, or at least most of us can remember, maybe you're too young, but when you used to get tax relief on mortgages, when you used to get tax relief on life insurance,
yes,
when you used to get tax relief on private health insurance, and what was that about? It was about encouraging us to do it. And then when we did it as a habit and got used to it and didn't want to do without it, then very gradually the help disappeared.
Yeah.
It's what is it? It's three things are inevitable: tax
and death.
Yeah, there's nothing in the middle. Tax, something, and death. I can't remember what the one in the middle is, but yes, there's certainly the birth. Oh, birth.
I used to put together the birth, marriages, and death. Yeah.
So yes, it's a fact of life. I think the other thing that is worrying us is that the way that road safety is being weaponized now. I mean, this latest thing about suggesting narrowing roads, all roads which have traditionally, since for about 1,000 years, apparently, have been 12 foot wide each carriageway, each side of the carriageway. They're now being talked about, just being suggested that they should be reduced to 10 foot 8 to stop people overtaking cyclists.
No law, of course, to stop cyclists overtaking cars.
Exactly.
No.
I mean, I think for a very long time now, safety has been used for something other than safety.
Yes.
When you think of the huge amount of money that is raised through speeding fines.
Yes.
And half the time, they're nothing to do with safety at all.
No, well, I mean, we just got like this little graph thing. And so if you did the driving process, basically, first you observe what's going on around you, then you form a hazard response, and then you execute that response. But unless you're doing the observation bit, all the rest you can forget. Because if you're not observing properly, you won't avoid the accident.
Yeah.
But the philosophy now is that all you need to do to drive safely is observe whatever the number on the tin plate is. And it's a lot more complex than that. Yeah.
But I mean, it goes beyond speed. I mean, you can get fined if you stop in a yellow box.
Yes.
Even if there's some circumstance arose to make you stop, you then have a very tortuous process to try and appeal against. And all this is about getting in money. And the thing about speed cameras is that conditions do not stay the same for 24 hours. So it may be entirely sensible to have a 30-mile-an-hour limit during busy times, but then people on a Sunday afternoon can cruise along at 50 and pose no hazard to anybody. It's an inflexible situation, and I think we need to get back to seeing speed restrictions as safety projects, not as cash raising projects, which they are.
Right.
They make a fortune from them.
Yeah. Well, our philosophy on this, Anne, is that what we really need is a road accident investigation and prevention branch, similar to what they have with aviation and marine, with people who actually have a safety background to look at what causes accidents, recommend remedial policies, including setting speed limits, setting enforcement policy, and to actually have teeth to audit, sort of wildcat audit thing, a bit like Ofsted, speed camera partnerships, to make sure that what they're doing is actually fair and that the objective is really casualty reduction and not revenue generation.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I think Anne's raised a very valid point with it in terms of having variable speed limits throughout the day, depending on the driving conditions. I mean, if you're sat on a motorway at 4 o'clock in the morning with no traffic around, what's the sense in staying at 70 when you could be going faster and being no danger to anybody?
You get dual carriageways, where, you know, it would be perfectly, as I say on a Sunday, perfectly safe to do 50, 60. But because they're down to 40, you know, because at certain times of the day that is justified, they're 40 all the time. You know, there's no flexibility in it, which in this day and age of digital technology,
of course, we've got the technology that could easily monitor that and get that up here.
And it's only being used in one way. I mean, the thing about 20-mile-an-hour limits around schools, well, most of the time the schools are shut. So if you have an electronic system that, you know, the caretaker goes in, turns the 20-mile-an-hour sign on when the school's opening and closing, when there's children around, that's fine. But you don't need that at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer holidays, because there's going to be nobody there. And that's the point you were making. Is the limit reasonable and sensible for the prevailing conditions?
Well, what Reform has said is that we will abolish 20 miles an hour completely, except outside schools, care homes, hospitals. And, you know, we'll still have them there, but we will not have them anywhere else. I mean, they're imposed right across London at the moment.
Yes.
I drove in London a couple of years ago now, and I came upon this business that it's 20 miles an hour, and I thought, oh, well, that's all right. You know, when I get out towards Westway and driving down towards the West Country, they'll disappear, you know, between here and there. Well, you know, I drove practically to Westway before the wretched things disappeared. Now, it is a nonsense. And, you know, the same thing goes. I'm all in favour of cycle lanes. I really am, because I think that if cyclists are and observe the lanes, that's quite important. But if they observe the lanes, it's much better for the driver as well as the cyclist, because you don't when wretched things are wobbling beside you very close. And I think you can feel that in big congested cities. But we've now, and that was fine as a safety measure, but it's no longer really a safety measure. It's now used to promote cycling, to discourage the motorist. Congestion. You know,
and to detract road space from other road users.
Exactly.
And if you look at the park lane thing, I mean, it's hardly ever used, the park lane cycle lane, and all the traffic is jammed into one lane. So you're creating congestion, creating emissions, creating frustration and delays, and wasting economic time.
Well, I used to live in Shropshire, and in Shrewsbury on the ring road in and out of Shrewsbury now, they've put a bus lane in the middle of the road, which already has proven to have delayed emergency vehicles from a nearby ambulance station from being able to get to accidents. So crazy decisions are being made still. And I agree with what you said, and cycling lanes, great when they're sort of putting cyclists in one part of the road, and as a precautionary thing. But when they are putting cycle lanes in above and beyond what's common sense, they really do need to be questioned.
The objective is ideological. It's not to do with road safety. It is to make driving unpleasant, road use unpleasant for motorised road users, so they think, oh, blow this, I'll catch the bus or whatever.
Well, most of the things that we've talked about today are aimed at getting people off the road. Pure and simple, get drivers off the road.
But of course, and I think Charlotte can show this, the net zero slide from Absolute Zero that you put up yesterday, Charlotte. I don't know if you've seen this document called Absolute Zero, produced by UK Fires, and it's a group of ivory tower academics, and it upsets me that my alma mater, Oxford and Cambridge, this is it, are all involved in this. But basically, this is the strategy that this document, which cost £5 million of public money, by the way, came up with for how we achieve net zero by 2050. So the top line is there's going to be a 40% reduction in road use between now and 2050. Well, when have we ever seen any reduction in road use apart from in COVID? There's always been 1 to 2% increase per annum, never a reduction. Rail, of course, which is one of the favoured children of environmentalists, that's left alone. Flying, there will be no domestic, no flying by 2050. There will be no shipping, no commercial shipping, so no cruises, no commercial sea freight by 2050. How will the country survive?
Well, we're an island.
We can't anything.
We need the sea. And we need to use the sea. It is a nonsense. And again, I think that as the public realise, what's being planned and how badly they're going to be treated and how seriously their choices are going to be curtailed, while China and the United States continue blasting carbon into the atmosphere.
Mostly followed by India and Brazil and all the rest of the developing world.
Well, I only picked those two because they're the biggest. But of course, you're right. There are others that take up substantial amounts of carbon. But I think as people begin to realise exactly how oppressive these measures are, this is the dream of somebody who wants to go back to the days of barter and live as our ancestors lived. This is not the dream of a progressive, thriving, dynamic.
Absolutely.
It's
a retrogression to almost feudal conditions.
Well, I think that every time I see a wind turbine, I think, we're going back to windmills. It is, and the idea, that we won't be able to cruise from Britain. Well, believe me, other countries will make it perfectly possible to cruise from them, and they will simply take the business and the profits.
Which is happening right across our industry at the moment, and as ours spirals down into insignificance, the America, Russia, China, all these other economies are powering forward
and laughing at us.
And that's the really embarrassing bit about it as well. That as you say, that they must be just think we're crazy.
Well, we are. We've got everything out of proportion. I mean, that's what's happened. And there hasn't been sufficient political challenge. I mean, both Labour and the Conservatives, and of course, the Lib Dems and the Greens, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. And so there hasn't been enough challenge. There hasn't been enough saying, well, hang on, maybe we're going too fast, or maybe we shouldn't be aiming at anything quite that absolute. There's been none of that at all. And, you don't have debates on this. As far as the BBC, for example, is concerned, it's settled science. And therefore, there's no debate. Well, there will be debate when reform gets in.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and as somebody whose background is in chemistry, there's no such thing as settled science. I mean, if you think there was a time when the received wisdom was that the sun revolved around the earth.
Well, but in more recent times, diesel was supposed to be the answer.
Well, exactly. That was the prevailing received wisdom.
Enemy number one, absolutely ridiculous. There is never such a thing as settled science, and things that we think are absolutely right now and unchallengeable may well be challenged in the future, and most scientists will admit that, except when it comes to climate change, and then no room for dispute at all. Oh yes, there always is.
And certainly if you look back into the historical record, the climate's never been stable. We've had the Minoan warm periods, the Roman warm periods, medieval warm periods. We have a warm period now, and in between we've had dips downwards, Maunder minimum, and then of course in the late 1700s, early 1800s, we had the Little Ice Age when there were ice fairs on the Thames.
I know the Thames was frozen over. When we say, if something's cold now, if we get a cold snap, we say, it's climate change. And if we get a warm snap, we say, it's global warming. Everything.
I saw a funny cartoon today. It was like one of those Wheel of Fortune things spinning around, and whichever thing the pointer landed on, that was climate change. So it doesn't matter if it's warmer, colder, wetter, drier. It's all climate change, which it is, but it's what's causing the climate change that's the key issue. And the culprit actually isn't man-made carbon dioxide. There's a lot more factors involved than just.
I mean, they brush over so simply as well. You know,
Yes.
when we get their predictions wrong.
Yeah.
In the mid-70s, you know, there was actually talk of an ice age.
Yes, there was. That's right. I remember
When
that.
global warming really started taking off, and we had the Hadley Centre, which used to produce the figures every year, and the figures were going up like that, and scientists said that's going to continue, you know, it's going to continue. And then we had a 15-year pause. So they switched their ground. And so now the Hadley Centre figures, being gospel, they said, oh, well, of course, there are other measurements which you can use to show that warming has continued. And quite suddenly, the Hadley Centre. And it is when people shift the grounds of their argument that you really have to query, are they being honest and objective, or are they pushing an agenda? And I think because of the amount of money that's tied up in it, too many, not all, I wouldn't libel everybody, but too many are pushing an agenda.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, there's evidence that the Met Office has actually been putting in false data from stations that don't exist into their average temperature measurements for a long time, and not allowing for urban creep, because you know the measures from Coningsby are right next to the runway where there's typhoons taking off. And if you do your measurements there, you're obviously going to get the effect of jet exhaust trails during the takeoff periods, and that's where they got one of the records, the 40 degrees Celsius record, because there were 3 typhoons taking off when they took the measurements. So there's a big spike, and then it drops down again when they've gone. And there's a lot of stations now which are compromised, and I think they have ratings for them. 1 is top notch, and 5 is junk science, and a lot of them are actually in 4 and 5, which is very dodgy. 2 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius, and some of them plus or minus 5. So yes, it's definitely true. I think you're quite right, Anne, that they've been captured by climate evangelists, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that sums it up. The term evangelists just sum it up, because climate change has become a religion, quite honestly. And if you dare to depart from it, you face an inquisition.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's history repeating itself. And as it was then, it's the evangelists, the people who were questioning it, who were persecuted, but it turned out they were actually right.
Well, it was called global warming for a long time, but then when it was, when we had lots of cold weather, they thought, well, we better change this to climate change then. And
as Anne's pointed out, you can't lose then, because anything.
You can't, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think I'm right in saying, Brian, that we're coming out of we're warming as a planet.
We actually go back and look at the historical record.
Yeah,
something called the Pleistocene Ice Age, and we started to come out of that at the time when we started doing instrumental measurements in the late 1700s, early 1800s.
Exactly.
And that actually was probably one of the coldest periods in the last 10,000 years. So it's only one way the temperature is going to go then. Well, unless it's going to go the other way. And if it goes the other way, we're in deep trouble. Then you're in the full-scale ice age, and that's not going to be good.
So as we always say, the climate is changing, but it always has done and always will. So,
absolutely. Just accept it. And the key thing we need to do is adaptation, not adaptation, because we can't really mitigate it. We can't affect what the climate's going to do. All we can do is mitigate, is adapt to the consequences.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. That was very much Nigel Lawson's argument.
Yes, very much
trying
so.
to make the climate do the thing that it's not naturally doing, adapt humanity to what it is doing.
Which is what we've done all through history until the last sort of 50 years or so, really. I think we've covered quite a lot of quite useful ground here. Were there any other areas that you felt that we should maybe touch on, Anne?
I think you were talking about civil liberties earlier.
Yes. I mean, this is a big one for us. Digital ID, because we have the ABD is a not-for-profit limited company, and we are being pressured because we're 2 of the directors to actually register for digital ID just because we're directors. Well, the whole thing around this is very oppressive, and it's very much, to me, the sort of Soviet style command and control philosophy, trying to get the government trying to get it's fingers into everything that people do and interfere, when actually what we want is the opposite. We want light touch, we want a small state, and we want people to be enabled to live their lives without feeling like they've got the Stasi staring down from behind them.
We might have the first area of very slight disagreement. Now, I am not wedded to digital identity cards. I am wedded to the idea that we should have ID cards, even if only for a limited period. You can have a sunset clause and say that after 5 years they cease, because I know that they would help us tremendously in the fight against illegal immigration. They would help tremendously in the fight against various crimes. And they also, they have benign effects as well. It's easier to identify bodies if you've got ID. And I draw a parallel with CCTV. Now, I was in government at the time, and there was huge resistance to CCTV, and everybody said, it's the spy in the sky. It's going to film citizens going about their lawful occasions. Oh, no, no, no. And a lot of councils refused to have it. And then we had those pictures all across our television screens of the abduction of little Jamie Bulger, who was subsequently murdered. And suddenly everybody saw what the point of these cameras was. We couldn't meet the demand. It just exploded. And of course now, everybody has it on their doorbells and, on their car dashboards, and we've got it everywhere. And we accept it because we understand its purpose. Now, I think the first time that you had a major crime solved by ID cards, or a major breakthrough on illegal immigration produced by ID cards, people would understand their purpose and would accept them. But I would be perfectly happy, because I do understand the civil liberties fears about these things, I would be perfectly happy to say it needn't be digital. And crucially, we can put in a sunset clause. You don't have to have it forever.
Yeah, I think it's
a point when we have to examine what we've got. But I mean, I'd say this, I go to countries where you have to carry some form of identity with you. Now in France it is, it's a proper identity card, and in Germany. But hang on, let me get this one out. But when I was a member of the European Parliament in Brussels, we had to carry ID by law, but it didn't have to be any particular type of ID. I mean, I stuck my passport in my handbag. Nobody ever asked for it. Nobody ever asked for it. That's not the point of it. It's not to run around saying papers, please, a la 1940s. It's not that at all. So there is a slight measure of disagreement between us, but I'm always prepared to, try and soothe people down by saying, well, let's just try it for a while.
I mean, certainly, I carry my driving license around with me, obviously, most of the time now, because it's quite easy to carry. But it's the concern about mission creep, really. And the people. I mean, it's at the moment it's in the conspiracy theory area. But this idea of central bank digital currency and being able to bring in a social credit system linked to your ID, be it digital, as in places like China, is just abhorrent. That you can be turned into a non-person at the flick of a switch. And that's, I think,
facing that. I mean, I think any version that comes out of a British government, bearing in mind we have a democratic system, we have an opposition, and we have all the rest of it, and we have the rule of law. Bearing in mind all of that, I think that it would be manageable. As I say, I'm not wedded to any particular system, and I'm quite happy to make it on a temporary basis. But I am not going to say that I am in principle opposed to ID cards, because I actually think they could be benign.
Well, the collection of people's data digitally. I not long come back from Croatia, and on the way back from the cruise terminal, we had to give our digital fingerprints and have a photo taken that then sits with your passport record, because we are no longer members of the European Union in the way that we were. So that is a form of digital ID, and I think as long as it has limited use rather than is all-consuming, then I don't really have a problem with it. And I like the idea of what you said, Anne, whereby it might have, say, a 5-year trial period, and then if it's not working, it's scrapped. But again, if it went some way to solve something similar to what happened to young Jamie Bulger, well, then it's going to get a lot of public support. So yeah, it ought to be treated as a trial period rather than this is life from now on.
Go with that, Jeffrey. I should say at this point that Reform's policy is not to have ID cards, but Iron Reform just takes slightly different paths on this one, because although I understand all the concerns about civil liberties, I lived through the CCTV, and I know that sometimes those concerns can be misplaced.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's it's not unreasonable. We can agree or disagree on nuances, but I think that as long as it's not being used to control people's lives, I mean, it's fair enough. Obviously, trying to control criminals, but if it gets to the point where it starts to interfere with people going about their normal daily lives, then I think that's where you draw your line in the sand.
Yeah.
Frankly, we're under so much surveillance at the moment. It's very difficult. If you walk out of your front door and you walk any distance at all, you'll be picked up by umpteen different cameras. Private cameras, public cameras. We are now with a surveillance society. If I drove from my home in the West Country to Scotland, the cameras would say exactly.
Yeah, we have to track your journey. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's not, as I say, as long as it's used for the purposes which it was intended to curb crime and to make people safer, that's fine. But beyond that, I would become very uncomfortable with it. But we'll have to see. I mean, the problem is as you know, you can find a policy and say, oh, we have no intention of bringing this policy in at the moment. So that just means it could be next week or the week after. So I'm always a bit suspicious of guarantees, cast iron guarantees by Mr. Cameron and people like that.
Yeah, I know. I think you're absolutely right to be cynical about it. But as I say, Reform is opposed to it. So if you have a Reform government, it'll be people like me trying to fight them to do something that otherwise they won't do. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, excellent. I think this has been a useful discussion. I've certainly enjoyed it a lot. So I think we've covered everything. We've talked about net zero. We've talked about hijacking road safety to actually reduce people's freedoms. And we've talked about digital ID. So I think that's been a good combination.
Good for one discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from my point of view, it's been lovely catching up.
Great. How's Andy Richardson? Is he okay?
Yeah, as far as I know, he's doing well. He's now got something equivalent of like a small mansion somewhere in Worcester. He's got about 10 cars, 6 vans. He's doing very well.
Doing very well indeed. When he works.
He does work 25 hours a day, that lad. Yeah. Been lovely seeing you. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Anne. It's been very good. I'm sure we will take the opportunity to ask you to come on again in the future and we can review how things are going.
Be delighted. Right.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.